Hi, I'm Jessica, and welcome to my faith journey. I want to thank everybody for being here and listening. I started this channel because I'm still growing in my faith. I don't have it all figured out, and I want to be able to share what my life is like with God. So I was raised Christian, but not in the sense that, we didn't go to church like every Sunday. So I do remember growing up attending church like early elementary, like maybe 5, 6 years old, going to church. And we did stop attending church as a family around that time. And the only other way I was really around the Christian faith was my grandparents. So every time we'd go over there, my grandmother would be reading scriptures to us, would try to take us to churches. My grandmother did. She was always trying to save us. She was always trying to make us repeat prayers after her because we weren't baptized. I think only one of all my siblings was baptized, and the rest of us weren't. And she felt like she wanted to make sure that when she got to heaven, we were there with her. So every time we went there, she would pray with us, and I feel like she was trying to baptize us. And I remember thinking as a kid, like, are you allowed to do this? You're not a pastor. I do remember thinking that. And later in life, when I went to go visit her after she moved out of state, I do remember her trying to give us communion. Now, at that point, I was a member of a church. But yeah, she was always trying to save us. And there was a while, too, that I was like resentful about it because I did feel like I was being force-fed religion. So I won't get too deep into that because this is just supposed to be my background with faith. But I ended up attending a Lutheran university and taking some theology classes, which at the time I didn't think were going to be a big impact. I was taking them because it was a requirement. And I didn't know anything about the Lutheran religion and what its difference was. In fact, I didn't know a lot of the differences between a lot of the denominations. I just always called myself a non-denominational Christian. So I was reflecting if I ever drifted from God. And I don't think I ever drifted from God in the sense that I didn't believe, but there were many years when I didn't want to learn more or didn't try to learn more and get to know God. And I stopped attending church. So earlier in my life, after my parents left the church that we were attending back in elementary school, I wasn't attending church. My aunt would take us to like vacation Bible school and a couple things at her church intermittently, and they were always very welcoming and it was a good experience. So there was nothing negative there. But then when I got married and we still did join a church and I became a member and everything, there was many years where I just stopped going to church. I think it was after I had my kids. Well, even pre-kids. There was times I was like, I want to sleep in. I'm not going to church. And I'll be honest, there's times now where I'm just exhausted from my day to day. And so I will sleep in a little bit and skip church, So I do try to make it, but we're human. And so I stopped attending church as much, and I wasn't reading the Bible, but I still did believe. But I wasn't making any kind of effort to further my relationship with God. Over time, my relationship with Jesus has changed. I do have to say, early on, I kept feeling like there was this voice inside. So the first time I felt it was, we first got married, and I was a member of the church, and we were actively attending the church. And I didn't think it was related to the church, this feeling. But I kept thinking, there's something I'm supposed to be doing. There's something I'm supposed to be doing that I'm not doing. And I remember talking to my mother-in-law and saying, I think I'm going to switch my career and become a teacher. And she was a teacher for her career. And I knew I liked kids, and I thought, it'd be fun. And she said, well, why don't you try out Sunday school and see if that satisfies that urge? And I think she knew that I wasn't capable of doing it. Because, well, not that I wasn't capable, but when I tried to do it, I did enjoy the Sunday school aspect, but what I didn't enjoy was I had a couple kids that were very difficult to deal with, and I didn't have kids of my own. So I didn't know how to get them to cooperate. And it was very interesting. I did have fun. So what I started to do is I realized I'd captivate their attention if I came up with some really neat craft ideas and things like that that were fun. So I'd get them to sit through the lesson to wait for that craft that they knew they were going to get to do, because I love crafting. And so the kids really liked the crafts. In fact, a lot of them will tell me even years later that they remember making crafts in my class. So that did work out, but it took a while to get to that point of the difficult behaviors and what to do. Yeah, there was a funny story. There was these tables, they were circular, and there was a space in the center. And I don't know why. It's like they had two moon shapes and they put them together. So it's like we had a circular table, but nobody sat in the middle of that, in the donut hole, you know. And this kid was throwing stuff down the donut hole and saying that he was throwing things in the toilet and making everybody laugh. And I thought, oh boy. You know, and so that was just like one example of like, okay, how do I get this distracting behavior to stop and get him to cooperate? So anyway, it was difficult. And that's when I realized, okay, yeah, teaching is a full-time job, not for me. But I actually stuck through with Sunday school for a very long time. So I ended up becoming pregnant, having a baby. I remember bringing the baby to church and still helping with Sunday school while one of the other ladies would carry my baby around and get him to fall asleep and play with him, and she adored it anyway. She was always super nice, and so I was still able to help with Sunday school. And then I had my second, and then I did, there was like probably almost a year, maybe, where I know I didn't volunteer, and I don't think I was going as much because now I had two kids, and I was back at work, so I was getting pretty burnt out. So I didn't attend church. And then I remember a member at our church sending me a note or a letter at home saying, hey, you need to come back. So at that point, I think, I still believed, but my faith still wasn't that strong. And I was already an adult with some kids, and I had faith, but I felt like I wasn't exercising my faith. I'll say that, because looking back, I had an instance where I was hospitalized, and I knew God was with me through that. But even then, my faith, I didn't talk to God on a daily basis. And so over time, I started praying more. And because I was preparing for these Sunday school lessons, I was reading the Bible more. It did actually grow my faith. So it's funny that her direction led me to Sunday school, which I thought, well, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach at a school. But it led to me studying the Bible more and learning more. Like, yeah, I knew some of the basic stories, but a lot of the stuff that you memorize or the books of the Bible, like I didn't know the books of the Bible by heart. And I think it's fine if you don't, but they would watch videos that were real catchy songs about books of the Bible. And so, yeah, I learned actually a lot by learning with the kids. So it turned out really well. And then over time, I would pray more, or even just driving to work, have a conversation with God, just either say a prayer or say thanks or ask for something or, but I never really made like a space at home first thing in the morning because just things were so chaotic. Trying to get up in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. I'm a night person. I'm a night owl. Getting out that door, it was difficult to get out the door. And so to throw in some Bible time, I just never made time for it. And I'm like, oh, when I retire, I'll make time for it. So I have to make it work in my life too, but I also know I need to set time aside. But since I have a decent commute to work, I would do some praying in the car and have a conversation, or I do suffer with some anxiety at times with driving. So I would say a couple things to calm myself down and kind of talk to him when I'm having an episode. So yeah, I think that my relationship with Jesus has changed over time. I feel like I have grown closer by being in the Word more too. And then it's interesting because now I'm no longer helping with Sunday school, but I'm helping with youth group, and I'm studying other things as well now, where there's like questions, about the authenticity of the Bible and how it was created and stuff like that we're talking about. And so I'm learning more there about exactly how that all came about, because it's stuff that you don't usually think of. So I do feel like I am growing my faith, and I'm part of like numerous Bible studies. My friend invited me to a Bible study at her church, and it's absolutely wonderful. I always leave it feeling like my cup is so filled, and I never knew really what that felt like or how that came to be. But in the, before that, I didn't have that experience. I was at other Bible studies, but I didn't leave there filled with the Holy Spirit. And it's great when you can get to that point. So I would think there's two turning points or seasons in my life that were hard and that I think helped shape my relationship with God now. One was that hospitalization I mentioned, and how I had to go for surgery. I had to have a blood transfusion after my surgery. There was all these issues. I was in the hospital for almost a month, maybe just shy of a month, because I went in there right before Halloween. I remember I was 16 and I was trick-or-treating at the hospital. It was a children's hospital still. They still had me on the children's side, but I remember trick-or-treating there. And then I remember getting out right before Thanksgiving. That was a difficult time, but I look back like, gosh, I was only 16 and I was so mature about it. Like, I don't remember, I know I was scared. I don't remember being upset. I remember my sister being there with me and staying the night as much as she can and making me laugh, which after surgery, it was related to Crohn's, and I had a pretty large incision just under my belly button on my stomach. And she was making me laugh, and I was like, don't make me laugh. Oh my gosh, don't make me laugh. I still remember a lot of that. Or I remember the hard times when I just felt so filthy because I had all these IVs on me and was not necessarily bedridden. I can get up and walk, but there was a certain amount of time I wasn't allowed to get wet or take a shower, so it was like sponge baths. So the first time I was allowed to, I asked her, because I was still very weak from everything. I said, can you help me with my shower? So I remember stuff like that too. So anyway, she's always been there for me through the thick and the thin. But yeah, so that was a difficult time where when I look back, I realized God was with me. I had a calm and a peace about me that I don't know that I would be the same like that if I had to go through that now. I hope I would. And I don't know if it's just naive of being a kid, but I was 16. I wasn't like super young. But yeah, so I did feel his presence with me, and that whole experience really did change me. I mean, I still was adventurous as a teen, but it made me really appreciate life, and I knew I wasn't invincible. So I was more cautious, and I remember a couple of my friends talking to me and saying, "You're acting like an old lady now. Why are you acting?" Well, I had an almost near-death experience. They were telling me before the surgery, I was losing blood internally and dropping weight drastically. I was pretty much a skeleton. So yeah, it was difficult looking back, and I thought I coped with it really well. I'll just put this little blip in here too. I thought I did, and I went to see a therapist about that anxiety I was saying that I was getting, and we got on, I don't even remember how we got on the topic of this surgery and everything, and I remember like I was bawling, and I was like, what in the heck? Where did this come from? Like, why am I getting upset? And she's like, well, you must have buried some of those emotions. And so it was very interesting looking back. But yeah, that's definitely one of the points in my life where I felt his presence, but still wasn't having conversations with him daily. So even though you could say I drifted from him or wasn't close with him, he was with me. And so when you realize that kind of thing, it puts things in perspective too. Like, you look at the Bible, and I'll just do a real brief thing here, that all the different times the Israelites pulled away from God, and he always tried to, be there, right there with them and bring them back to him. And so he does that with us too. Like, we're not perfect. He knows that, because once sin was introduced into the world with Adam and Eve, we're not perfect human beings. And he still gave us our free will, because there's dignity in that. Like, what's the sense if you're going to make someone do things and make someone love you? It's more dignified to have free will. So there was a second time where I feel like I really had a tough season too. I had both my kids, and my son started school, kindergarten, and he had a lot of problems with school. And there was like a lot of sensory and odd behaviors, rolling around on the floor, kicking things, not intentionally breaking things, but I guess he like broke a drawer or something in the classroom. He would tie his shoes together, just do all kinds of weird things. There was constant behaviors. He was struggling to concentrate. It was stuff that I don't remember seeing at home. So I think he was having a hard time adjusting, but I ended up trying to get it figured out. So I took him to a place that does evaluations, and they said he had high functioning autism, and just all the different struggles with him trying to do homework, him trying to concentrate, social interactions. When we'd go places, he'd wander off. Oh gosh, there were times at church he'd leave the building. I was like, where'd he go? Where is he? And we'd find him outside. And so I was like, oh my gosh, he's a flight risk. And that behavior did stop eventually, but that stuff was scary. And even trying to take him to school, I had to be at work. I remember dropping him off with a friend, and she was going to take him to school. And before I left, he went running down the street like he was trying to flee the situation. And it's like, where are you going? You're not in danger here, there was just a lot of struggles. And so what's interesting about that is I've had issues for quite a while with my weight. And when I look back at all my data from weight, because I'm a data person, I like my research and I like my data. But when I look back at the numbers that are plotted, because I plotted them in MyFitnessPal, I can see where I was like my heaviest and how my weight spiked. And I was like looking at those years on the chart, like, what happened in those years? Those were the years where he started school and we were going through all that stuff, trying to figure out what was going on with him. And I was eating my emotions. So instead of turning to God or praying or, I was trying to comfort myself with food. And I still like to do that. I love my food, but I am working on it. So I feel like those two situations, especially this last one, and that was years ago. It's been a while. And ever since, well, all these times I've been trying to work on my relationship with God. So I definitely had disappointment and not necessarily confusion about my future, but I still worry about my children's futures. Just with, when you see that they don't seem capable of certain things, you're like, oh my gosh, are they going to be able to make it on their own? And let's see. At that time, I guess the time with my son attending school, I think I just felt distant, like God was distant from me. I don't necessarily feel like he abandoned me. I wasn't mad at him. He actually really wasn't in my forethoughts. He wasn't like right there. I wasn't thinking about God. I was thinking about me, my situation, and my son, And I think that's a lot of times the problem. And that's just human nature to be, I think, self-centered with stuff like that. So in that season, God did put different people in my life that would help with the situation. And so I do feel like there was some correction in the sense of like options to help him be more successful. And then I felt better about things too. And then just putting other people in my life where when we shared stories, like, oh, I'm not alone in this. And oh, there's other things we can do. And I'm not doing something wrong, because that was a big thing. And I still do that. You'll hear throughout these podcasts that I have had a history of very negative self-talk. I'm so great at encouraging others, but I'm so critical of myself, so critical. And so I kept thinking, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Why is he having all these problems? What is it that I didn't do? And it was a big relief when we did get the diagnosis. It was bittersweet. It's like you don't want to get that diagnosis, but at least I knew what was going on. And it made sense when they explained it all to me. But I just remember crying, and my husband was like rolling his eyes, like, oh gosh, here she goes again. Because I'm one of those that my emotions are on my sleeve, not all the time. Like I take constructive criticism really well and stuff like that, because I actually appreciate honesty like that. But there are times where my empathy, or even just watching a movie or a certain song, things will touch me, I'll cry. And so, but this was a relief in a sense of, okay, it's not me. It's not my fault. So that helped. And I think I was learning a little bit of patience and stuff too. And I feel like I still had to kind of heal from just that whole situation. I don't know. I think I still have some sensitivities about it, but anyhow, I'm getting way off track here. So with those situations, I did feel like when I look back, God was there. He was faithful, even though I wasn't. And over these years, from reading the Bible and going to different Bible studies, I found that, my self-talk is negative. And I was reading scriptures that would say how God sees us, how he views us. And I remember thinking, I don't believe, it was hard for me to believe that God would say all those positive things about me. His timing, his mercy, I learned that he's there, no matter if when we're not present, but he is. So now I feel like I'm still growing in my faith, but I do feel like I'm starting to learn a little more patience because I am always in a hurry for things and trusting him. So now when I have a difficult situation, I try to stop worrying about it and put my trust in him and surrender to him. And also, at least a situation I'm thinking of is where, I ask for forgiveness about something and recognize that I can't do it by myself, that I need his help. I do try to talk to him on a daily basis, whether it's just a tiny little prayer in the car or a prayer later, or sit down and read my Bible. And that's how I'm learning to try to make him part of my daily life so that I don't get away from studying. Because I feel like when I'm not studying the Bible or I'm not praying or I'm not going to Bible studies, then I'm not growing my faith. And so that's how I feel, at least right now, from what remember in the past with how things were. My faith was stagnant because I wasn't doing extra stuff. It wasn't until I really started reading the Bible and talking with friends, and even found out that my boss at work, we were talking about religion. He's actually the one that told me about that series, The Chosen, and I love that series. That's actually what was going to start all this podcast. It was going to be doing something on The Chosen, just because I didn't have a topic and I thought it would be good just to go through the episodes. And I still might do that. My friend and I talked about doing that possibly. So yeah, that was surprising to be at work and even encounter somebody with strong faith that was willing to talk about it at work, because I know we've got to be careful being supervisors and stuff. If people try to say you're pushing it on them, you can get in trouble. So I'm always real careful about that kind of stuff. But so I started this channel because I want a place for real faith. I want people not to feel alone. And I want to share what God's teaching me, but also try to learn through others. And I'm hoping I'll be able to bring some friends and on, or at least get their stories and share them as well. And I want to encourage other people who feel like they're imperfect, because I know that I always feel imperfect and I always feel like I'm doing stuff wrong, and I always feel like, yeah. But even though God made us in his image, we are imperfect, and that's okay. And so anyhow, you'll get my testimonies, but I'm hoping I'll be able to get other people's testimonies. Faith struggles, lessons God teaches us. We'll have prayer, we'll have scripture, and then try to give encouragement for hard seasons. So again, thank you for listening. I hope I didn't talk your ear off. I kind of got on some tangents where I feel like squirrel, but I'm just trying to be real and just trying to cover a variety of topics to just kind of give you an idea of what the podcast will be like. But I know the topics are going to range. And as I was reviewing topic ideas, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much I could talk about. So feel free to comment. If you want, you can say, what has your faith journey looked like so far? And I could either read those on one of my episodes or just leave them in the comments. But I want you guys to know, though, that you're not alone. And I did want to do a closing prayer. So, Lord, thank you for walking with us through every season. Thank you for your patience, your mercy, and your faithfulness. Help us trust you even when we don't understand. In Jesus' name, amen.